Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Surfing the Net, a presentation of Howard Payne University. Join us now as we explore the Internet and find out how to better utilize one of the more important communication means of our century. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Dooley and Gary White.
Good evening, and welcome to Surfing the Net. My name is Chris Dooley, and I'm your host. And here to my left is Mr. Gary White, who's the chairman of the computer department here at Howard Payne.
And I'm going to be answering the phone call. I'm about ready to leave, and when I leave, you start calling in. You should be seeing the telephone number that you can dial, and I'll be at the other end waiting for your questions. Chris, do you have the phone number? What's the phone number?
Yes, it's 649-8902, and this is a live broadcast, so feel free to call in with questions at any time during the show.
And that's where I'm heading right now. I'm going to head for the telephone, so I'll be waiting for your calls.
Okay, we've been having some technical difficulties here tonight because of the storms, and about 10 minutes ago we just went completely black, so we're kind of off on our levels a little bit, so we apologize if we're looking terrible right about now. But anyway, before we go on with our course, I want to just explain a little bit. We've got a pretty large viewing audience. I was surprised in finding out how many we actually have listening and watching. And our viewers really have different levels of computer experience. We have many that are new to the field of computers, and we also have many computer buffs, as I like to call them, watching our show. And I want to go ahead and warn you, computer buffs, we're gearing this show towards the people who really just bought their new computer and are trying to figure out what all they can do with it and how to get on the internet. So, but we hope everyone will learn at least a little bit from our show, and so that's why we're kind of trying to explore a huge variety of different topics. And so maybe some of you computer buffs will see something that maybe you haven't seen before. We've got some good feedback on our show last week, but one thing people were telling me is that the part on the travel where we went into the airline part, they said it was a little bit rushed, and they were asking me if I could review that real quick. So before we get started on tonight's topic, I want to review that real quick and show you a little bit about the airlines here. Okay, so now we'll switch to the computer here. And I'm going to go on to, I already know the URL address, so to save time, I'm going to go straight to it. To go to it, you type this. I'm going to go to Delta Airlines this time. I'm going to go to www.deltaair.com. And we'll get their information page here. And here you see we have lots of different information. You can go, you have phone numbers, you've got their news. But what I'm going to show you real quickly is their flight schedule. And this again comes in very handy when you're trying to plan out your vacation and you want to see where all a certain airline will fly to and their schedule even, it'll show you. So here we're at the flight schedule, and we'll scroll down here. And we see you can have a scroll box here, and you can choose where you're going to depart from and where you want to go to. So let's just say, for instance, we're going to go from, let's say, Dallas. We'll scroll down here. There's Dallas. Let's say we want to go to, how about Paris, France? I believe Delta flies international. So I'll scroll down here to the P's, and there's Paris, France. So now I have my departure set, my arrival destination set, so I will submit that request. And what comes up now is a little security notice, which I will cover in a few minutes when we get to our topic of tonight's show. And so for now, I'll just continue that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And here comes up the flight schedule. And this tells you apparently there are 3 different flight numbers that go from Dallas to Paris. And here we have a little chart that tells you what days of the week and when the flight actually takes place. Here you can get additional information. Let's say we want to fly, starting in the late afternoon. We'll go to the details of this flight real quick. And this not only tells you the times, but it also tells you your arrival city. Apparently they make a stop in Atlanta. It tells you when you arrive in Atlanta and when you leave Atlanta. So it's really pretty detailed information. So I figured a lot of you could find that helpful. And so, but that's pretty much an overview of what that was. So now, for tonight's show, we decided we want to talk a little bit about security and viruses. And so I've got a lot of information on viruses, but real quickly I'm going to talk a little bit about security. The main thing you need to remember when you're surfing the internet is not to give out too much personal information. Now, that's mainly because you're not completely sure who you're hooking up to and who's on the other end of the internet, who's on the other end of the site that you're connected to. Now, it'd be very easy for some HTML programmer to set up a page where they say there's some kind of official company. If they can just find some kind of graphic file of some logo, they can make it look very official. So whenever you see an official looking page, you shouldn't be very sure that it's an official place to go. Some things to look for: if it's a corporation or some kind of company, if they do not leave an 800 number or some real specific information, that should be a warning sign that this may not be a legitimate spot. I also want to point out, which is related to the thing we saw on the screen a while ago, the internet's kind of funny. When you connect to a site, it's kind of a two-way communication, actually, and a lot of people weren't aware of this. When you connect to a site, you're telling it the address you want to go to, but the server that you're connecting to also knows where you're coming from. And so, like, say you're connecting to, just any company, say Walmart, and you're connecting to them, they also know the location of where you are as far as your internet technical address. And so a lot of people are not aware of that, and so that's why when we were going in to get some information about this Delta flight, they came up with a little dialog box saying that this is a part that you may not really want to get into if you want to keep things completely confidential. And that was simply warning us that we're about to send to that site some information about you and where you're coming from. So Netscape's really good about that. They'll have several warnings, and they'll pretty much warn you whenever you should be warned about security. So, but the major thing we want to talk about tonight is computer viruses. Now, let me explain a little bit about what viruses are. I know there's a lot of people out there that are already pretty familiar with viruses, but in case you have not been told what viruses are, they're actually computer programs, but they're not programs you really want to buy and use. There are some people out in America or out in the world that will want to program a virus. Now, don't ask me why, but simply for the sole reason of harming someone's computer or harming someone's data. And they do that simply by programming this technical program that will duplicate itself and spread, and then it'll end up getting onto your files on your hard drive or onto your floppy disk, and it'll, in time, if you don't remove it, it'll actually start damaging some of the data on your computer. And the thing that makes viruses so bad is that they transmit so easily. It's interesting that we're talking about viruses tonight because this afternoon we actually had a virus come up in the computer lab at Howard Payne today called the stealth virus. And so actually I've seen lots of viruses come through our computer lab, and so it's really a dangerous thing out there, because if you are using a computer that has a virus and you put a disk in, if you access that disk in any way, even just change that drive, there's a good chance you've transferred that virus. And so say you take that disk to another computer somewhere else, someone else's computer, and you access that disk, you don't know you have a virus on it, but you can see how it can spread from computer to computer just by simply sharing disks or, using your disk in multiple locations. So a lot of times it can be hard to fight viruses. Even in the computer lab, we'll have a virus and I'll scan the computers for a virus, but even if I've cleaned up the computers at the workstations in the lab, if there had been a virus, there's a good chance that the students using those computers have gotten their disks infected. So I can even spend a lot of time cleaning out the whole computer lab, but I could still get the virus the very next day when that student brings their disk back. So that's why whenever you get a virus, you really need to be alarmed, and you need to clean it quick, and you need to start thinking about all the different disks you've used on the infected computer, and you can never be too safe with virus fighting. I've seen a lot of viruses around Brownwood. They are out there. A lot of you may not realize how many are actually going around, but in my own computer experience, I've seen numerous viruses. The main ones I've seen here in this area are the stoned virus. I've seen lots of the stoned. I've seen the monkey virus. I've seen the stealth virus. And the NYB virus I cleaned a few weeks ago, actually. And again, it's interesting, I actually cleaned the stealth virus today in the computer lab. Let me give you some symptoms of a virus and things that may point to the fact that you may have a virus on your computer. First of all, it's possible a virus could cause your computer to all of a sudden start running a lot slower. Now, again, if your system starts running slow, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a virus, but that's one thing it can do. Another symptom could be that you run out of memory. Now, this can be both the main memory and RAM, and this can be running out of hard drive memory. A lot of viruses mess with sizes of files, and a lot of them will make programs take up more space. And so if you see, I'll give you an example, say you're working in Windows and you get a message saying you're out of memory, but say you only have 1 or 2 programs currently active, and you're pretty sure that there's no way that you could have filled up your main memory already, you may want to scan that computer for a virus. And also, the same thing goes for a hard drive. If all of a sudden your hard drive really starts filling up quickly and you're not installing that many programs on it, a lot of viruses will affect the file size, and so it'll end up eating up your hard drive space. So whenever in doubt, please scan your computer for a virus anytime something looks awkward. Also, if you're in DOS and you're running the dir command and you see some really strange characters, I've seen this a lot here at Howard Payne. If you see some really strange looking characters that are not regular English alphabetic characters on your screen as far as the file size or any other information as far as your computer, it's a pretty good chance that you have damage to that file, and it's probably because you have a virus. So, again, if you see anything awkward, please just scan your computer. You can never be too careful. Now, real quickly, I'm going to go over the types of viruses. It's such a growing thing now that they actually have classifications for viruses. One kind is a boot sector virus, and those are the kind that'll get into your part of the computer that boots up, and it tells your computer how to boot up and what programs you have on it and what operating system. And if you have one of those viruses, that can be very dangerous because if left on to damage long enough, that can actually start affecting how your computer boots up, and eventually it can even cause your computer to no longer boot up. So that's probably, I would say, probably the worst kind of virus you can get, because if you can't boot up your computer, obviously there's no way you're going to fix it and no way you can retrieve what you have. Right now, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back, talk a little more about viruses, and then we're going to answer your commercials. So, but right now we're going to take about a 2-minute commercial break. Welcome back. I believe we were covering the types of the classifications of viruses, and I think we had just covered the boot viruses, which is the most dangerous. There's also a time bomb virus, and those are the kind that will not really detonate until a certain file date on your system occurs. Now, an example of this is the Michelangelo virus. and a lot of you have probably heard of that. That is a virus that, if put on your computer, it'll just sit there. It'll not make your file sizes look different. You will not be able to notice that it's even on there. But come March 6th of every year, if you have it on your computer, it'll detonate. So there are some viruses that really don't do a whole lot, but wait for a certain trigger event or a certain date. Then they get that from your system date and time. There's also logic bombs, which basically will detonate if a certain object occurs. They'll wait for it can be anything. They can just wait for, your computer to do a certain method. And there are also viruses called worms, and worms are not really that destructive, but really what worms do is they like to duplicate themselves and just really spread out. And I think a lot of that has to do just for the satisfaction of whoever programs these viruses, just to see how much it has spread. And I really don't understand the mindset of these programmers that decide to do viruses, but I guess there are just some people out there that feel like they're mad at the world and they want to ruin people's data. You may be interested to know there's actually one good use of a virus I've heard of, and a lot of people weren't aware of this, but during the Desert Storm, the war, we found out that in the Middle East they were intercepting some of our computer transmissions. And so once we found out here in the United States that they were kind of intercepting and kind of tapping our computer transmissions, what we decided to do is we decided to program a computer virus. So the government got one of their big computer whizzes, and they actually programmed a virus designed to deliberately attack the Middle Eastern government's computer system. But that's only one good use of a virus I can think of. Now let me give you some tips to protect yourself from viruses. The main thing is to be careful when you're downloading a file. Now this is especially like small bulletin board systems. Bulletin board systems are just small miniature online services where you can share files and messages. But we have a local bulletin board system here in town called Reptile Land, and I know that the guy who runs that has a system where he automatically scans every file that's uploaded, so that he guarantees that there are no viruses on his bulletin board. But again, smaller bulletin board systems, those are dangerous if they don't use virus protection. Another way to protect, say, your floppy disk. If you think you're going into the computer that you're not quite sure if they may have a virus, you can always write protect it, and that's the little tab in the right-hand corner of the disk. You can simply slide up, and that means you're not going to make any changes to the data on the disk.
Yeah.
But yeah, here's the write protect tab right here. I know we're not zoomed in or anything, but you just simply slide that up, and that'll cause it to where you can't make any changes to the disk. But the main thing is to avoid downloading files from sources that you're not completely sure are safe sources and free from viruses. Now, here's what you do when you find a virus. You need to have an antivirus program. And my personal favorite that I've been using in all my virus fighting is called McAfee. McAfee is shareware, which means you do not have to purchase it to get the program, but they kind of require that you just evaluate it for about 30 days and then send in a check to register the program. But you can get it initially for free. You can get it right off the internet. And that's one thing I'm going to show you real quickly now on the internet, is how to get to the McAfee page and how to download it. So here, I happen to know the URL address of McAfee. So I'm going to type http// Okay, the address there, you may want to jot this down with a pen and paper. It's www.mcafee.com. And then this comes up, and if you click here, you can go to the download section of the page. And then click down here, you go to the download section of it. And then here, we've changed to FTP mode, where you're actually connected to their hard drive, and you can go through their directories and find their antivirus programs. And here you have a list of different files you can download to your computer. And I won't do that now, obviously, because we're pressed for time. But if you were just to simply click on one of these files, it would start to download to your computer, and you just simply tell it where to save. So, you would need to get the version. There's an index file here on the page that'll tell you which file to get for whatever kind of operating system you're running. So get the one that's designed for your computer, and please run it often. You can never be too careful. I can't stress that enough. Especially you Howard Payne students, if you think your disk should possibly have a disk, please go to one of the lab assistants on duty and have them scan your disk for a virus. There's nothing more stressful in my job than to find a virus in the computer lab. So now, do we have some questions?
Yes, we have some questions here. One question is about, well, shareware and copyrights. What's the difference? Shareware is sort of an open copyright for anybody. That means that anybody can copy it without fear of legalities. So there's your big difference between shareware and copyright laws. Another word that you need to be familiar with is pirated software. Pirated software is illegal software that was illegally copied and violates the copyright laws. You also have licensing agreements. Here at Howard Payne University, we have what are called site license, which means we buy one copy of the software and then we can duplicate it X number of times according to the licensing agreement. And this usually involves more money that we have to pay out. Another question was, I have nothing in my home directory on the network here at Howard Payne, and there's nothing there. I don't do anything. I don't use it. Why do I have to worry about the passwords? Well, you may not have anything in your home directory for someone to sabotage, copy, destroy, or whatever. But if they break into your home directory, they have broken in through your password, and that they may misuse your password for illegal uses, such as sending out large quantities of email through the internet and tie up the system, or use it as a doorway to break into the administration system. So it's very important that you take passwords and security very seriously. Another question was, how do viruses spread themselves? What is it that allows them to replicate or attach themselves? Well, in DOS, there are some commands called copy and append. And within the virus itself, it has a copy command to copy itself or append itself to some other file. Also, there's something called assembler code. Assembler code allows a programmer to access specific memory locations in RAM, in which case they can go maybe to a specific byte that's designed for booting the computer and mess up the contents of that storage area. So there are lots of ways that viruses can spread themselves. It involves programming of these DOS commands and what I would also call assembler commands. Let's see, what other questions do I have here?
It's very dangerous because sometimes you can just put a disk in, like I covered earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You can just put a disk into a drive and just simply change that drive. Maybe even just run a dir command to see what's on the disk. Even though you're not really copying any files onto the disk or doing much with the disk, you could still transfer a virus just by looking at a disk. So, and that's just simply how the virus is programmed, how to copy itself.
One of the things that was brought up is who would make some of these viruses, and Chris pointed out that our government, to sabotage foreign enemies. And this is another reason why there are so many viruses out there is corporate espionage, international espionage, to break computer systems of other countries or other businesses.
And there are some people that are just so cold-hearted in nature, they just decide to play a prank on someone. Maybe they hate life or they hate the world, so they just decide to program a virus.
Or sometimes they might program a virus and see how much it spreads, and to see if they get well known, to see if they get well known on national TV. Okay, I have a few other questions that really don't pertain to security. One was, why do we have the comic strip characters Archie and Jughead in the internet? Just a little side note, Archie was a misspelt word. When they developed the internet, they were going to use the word archive to access certain files off of FTP. But they misspelled it, and they spelled it Archie, and they left it that way, so that's how that happened. And then Jughead, yes, that word is on the internet for finding specific gopher sites. These are websites that are text-based. Jughead was developed by a guy named Johnny, and this is the honest truth. I guarantee you, this is the honest truth. It's an abbreviation for Johnny's Universal Gopher Hierarchy Execution and Display. It's an indexing system to search special websites known as gophers. Now you're probably going to ask the question, where did the word gopher come from? This is the honest truth. It came from the University of Minnesota. The gopher is their mascot, and when they developed the first website, they wanted to call it a gopher. And again, a gopher is a website just like you've been seeing on the computer, except it's text-based. It's text menu-based. Do you have anything to add, Chris?
A lot of terminology, and I tell you what, if you start using vocabulary like that much, you're bordering on becoming a computer nerd like us, so.
That's right.
So.
That's right.
Anyway.
Okay. What else do we have? Well, we want to talk about now what we're going to do next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about how to find jobs on the Internet. There's something called online careers. In fact, a few days ago, I checked to see how many jobs in the state of Texas for computers, and I found 1,500 jobs. And we'll take a look at that next week. Anything else?
Well, have a safe and happy Easter, and I hope you have a nice 4-day weekend.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week, and have those phone calls keep coming in, because I'm ready there to answer those questions.
Thank you for joining us here on Surfing the Net on Channel 10 of the Brownwood TV Cable Service. Be sure and join us again next Thursday evening as we continue to explore the Internet with Gary White and Chris Dooley. Surfing the Net is a presentation of Howard Payne University.